Hello, my name is Sean Robinson, host of LUMIX Live and marketing member at LUMIX USA. Welcome to the next exciting step in the new phase of LUMIX cameras. In 2008, Panasonic LUMIX pioneered the mirrorless camera category with the introduction of the LUMIX G1. Since that day, we've been innovating cameras and technologies to help photographers and videographers get the most out of their equipment. So today, it brings me great joy to introduce the newest addition to the Micro Four Thirds line of cameras, our new flagship camera, the LUMIX G9 Mark II. The first LUMIX Micro Four Thirds camera equipped with phase hybrid AF designed for high-speed performance, so you won't miss that decisive moment. Now, there's a great sense of accomplishment for photographers when we can capture the decisive moment we've been aiming for. Moments like that bird that takes forever to take off, that split second when our family or friends burst out into laughter, or that perfect play in our child's football game. At LUMIX, we strive to deliver cameras and technology that make these moments unmissable, and we believe the LUMIX G9 Mark II does just that. With the combination of our new and improved phase hybrid capable image sensor, paired with our latest image processing engine that generates 2 times the processing speed, the LUMIX G9 Mark II takes image quality, AF performance, and continuous shooting capabilities to the next level. The LUMIX G9 Mark II is equipped with a newly developed 25 megapixel 4/3 sensor, capable of ultra-fast readout speeds, phase hybrid autofocus, and an unparalleled ability to produce rich tonal range for generating the highest quality images with improved shadow detail among Micro Four Thirds cameras and even some full-frame ones. With an improved low ISO capability of ISO 100, the LUMIX G9 Mark II creates a major step forward for outdoor photographers who desire to capture the world through wide-open lenses. And in addition, the ability to utilize the 100 megapixel handheld high-resolution shot mode enables photographers to create stunning masterpieces full of detail. Now, phase hybrid autofocus has also made a leap forward in the LUMIX G9 Mark II. In addition to our human, eye, and animal tracking found in the S5 Mark II and Mark IIX, the LUMIX G9 Mark II adds a new recognition mode for even more precise focusing. The animal AF detection has been evolved to now include detecting animal eye AF mode. And for those motorsports photographers out there, the LUMIX G9 Mark II also includes a new car and motorcycle detection, something I'm personally excited to work with. In addition to our blazing fast 60 frames per second burst mode, the pre-burst functionality is making its return to the LUMIX line of cameras. First introduced in the LUMIX G9 Mark I, this mode has been expanded to extend control over the pre-burst duration. This puts the control in your hands to capture that missable shot you've been waiting for. So stabilization has been a long time highlight of the LUMIX line of cameras. And now with the G9 Mark II, stabilization has gotten even better. The LUMIX G9 Mark II pushes another step forward with the ability to compensate for 8 stops through our new active IS technology, allowing users with telephoto lenses to capture with confidence while out in the field. And usability of a camera in the field is incredibly important. From the screen and EVF resolutions to battery grips and the physical controls, access to manipulate various settings with ease can be the difference between getting the shot and a complete miss. Because of this, we've updated the rear LCD resolution to 1.86 million dots, and we're releasing a new DMW BG1 battery grip designed to match the new chassis and carry over the improved 8-way joystick found on the G9 Mark II. And as an additional benefit, the new DMW BG1 battery grip will also be compatible with the LUMIX S5 Mark II and Mark IIX. So technological advances are great, but what really makes a photograph or a video? It's color. At LUMIX, we've spent the last 15 years refining our color science to offer creators near unlimited control over your look. And nothing demonstrates this more than the inclusion of our recently released real-time LUT system. The LUMIX G9 Mark II enables users for both photography and videography to take that perfect look that you create in post and export it as a LUT or lookup table to put right on the camera. This saves you time in post for quick turnaround or gives you that next little level of added creativity to your style. But if you're a black and white photographer, you won't be disappointed either. With the inclusion of our Leica monochrome profile that's been developed under the L² technology with Leica. And Leica is well known for its superior picture quality and has a reputation from users all over the world for its outstanding depiction and expressiveness. Through our L² technology collaboration, we've learned the picture-making philosophy that Leica has built up over its long history and realized this mode as one of the new profiles found in the LUMIX G9 Mark II. Let's change pace for a moment. While the LUMIX G9 Mark II is a photographic powerhouse, video capabilities are still an important thing in this creative world. So it's in this regard that we couldn't just settle on the bare minimum. From the inclusion of 4K video at 120 frames per second and full HD slow motion recording up to 300 frames per second, and even 5.8K full sensor area recording up to 30 frames per second, the LUMIX G9 Mark II will prove itself ready for those that are just starting in videography and even those seasoned creators looking to add an additional body to your kit. And as a cherry on top, the LUMIX G9 Mark II is also able to record all of your photo and video options to an external SSD for unparalleled flexibility. Now, with active IS technology, the LUMIX G9 Mark II closes the gap to those situations where stable and fluid camera movements are a must. With advanced electronic image stabilization algorithms developed for the LUMIX G9 Mark II and customizable strength levels, gimbals can be considered a thing of the past. Whether it's that locked-off shot or following those birds across the sky, Active IS has your back. And as expected, with LUMIX cameras, V-Log and V-Gamut comes pre-installed, providing next-level color grading capabilities and an expanded 13+ stops of dynamic range for those situations where the light is challenging or HDR is your desired output. So cameras are the only one piece of this whole story. And the true advantage of Micro Four Thirds is the system as a whole. With focal lengths ranging from 14mm to 1600mm, the LUMIX Micro Four Thirds lenses offer near unlimited creative freedom and access to one of the most versatile platforms for creators. It's because of this versatility that we are proud to announce an update to the Leica DG line of LUMIX lenses. Now, back in January of 2023, we released our updated flagship 12-35 f2.8. With improved color reproduction, an anti-flare and ghosting reduction, shortened minimum focus distance, and the Leica DG design specifications, this workhorse lens brings our professional series of Micro Four Thirds lenses into the next phase along with the LUMIX G9 Mark II. But workhorse lenses don't just stop at 12-35 f2.8. And it's because of this that we're also excited to announce the renewal of our 35-100mm f2.8. With updated nano surface coating to reduce those flares and ghosting, and the Leica DG design specification, creators looking for the top level of performance in your telephoto range can look no further. But with the LUMIX G9 Mark II supporting phase hybrid autofocusing, animal eye detection, pre-burst stills capability, and an impressive 60 frames per second burst functionality, wildlife and sports photographers are going to need an ultra telephoto lens that's up to the challenge. That's why we are super excited to announce the renewal of the LUMIX Leica DG 100-400mm lens. This renewal not only improves the compatibility with the phase hybrid autofocusing, but also enhances the usability while out in the field. The new design improvements enable the compatibility with the LUMIX 2X teleconverter for reach out to an effective 1600mm field of view, and it refines the overall fit and finish and zoom control with the new lens. We think those of you working in the field with long lenses are going to love this update. So there's been a lot to unpack today. The new LUMIX G9 Mark II, the first Micro Four Thirds camera from LUMIX supporting phase hybrid autofocus, the renewal of our 12 to 35, 35 to 100, and 100 to 400 millimeter lenses designed specifically to take advantage of the G9 Mark II's new capabilities, and our firm commitment to the Micro Four Thirds world from LUMIX. The LUMIX G9 Mark II has evolved to take its place as the uncompromising flagship for photographers within the LUMIX line. And now, we can't wait to see what defining moments you create. So thank you for joining us on this exciting day for Micro Four Thirds photographers and videographers alike. Please join us over the next hour while Matt Fraser and I take your questions live and dig into the details that we couldn't get to during the presentation today. So, really exciting day today for LUMIX photographers, especially the Micro Four Thirds ones. Wouldn't you say, Matt?
I thought you were going to say Instagram followers, since we're live streaming on Instagram for the first time. You think the camera's more exciting than that?
Well, I mean, you know,
Absolutely, absolutely it is.
So, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we are now basically going to be sitting here into our Q&A session, and we're trying something a little different this go-round. We are simulcasting to our global YouTube account, our US YouTube account, as well as the global Instagram account. So if you have questions about the brand new G9 Mark II, drop them in the chat. And Matt's monitoring the global channel, I'm monitoring the USA channel, and I also have the Instagram channel here. Someone just says no audio on the Instagram account, so let me double check. How's that? That probably fixed the audio on the Instagram account, so there we go. So yes, if you have questions, drop them in the chat, and we're going to be answering them as we go through. So as you can tell, we are not in the LUMIX Live studio. We actually decided, you know, it would make sense that this is really targeted in towards outdoor wildlife,
sports photography, action photography.
Yeah. So let's actually just do this out away. So we are in a secluded kind of mountain range area, which we felt was kind of cool with this. And yeah, there is so much that we're really excited about on the G9 Mark II. As obviously as everyone has seen already with the announcement there, Four Thirds, or Micro Four Thirds, is back with a vengeance, and we are super committed to this platform and really kind of just bringing the best we can for everyone out there, and especially the photographers out there. I think that's a bit of a change for us over the last couple of years.
That's why I'm not talking very much, honestly. No, in all seriousness, I think we're both extremely excited to replace the G9 with the G9 Mark II. Frankly, we're at the 15th anniversary for LUMIX G-Series, and that means that we're at the 15th anniversary for mirrorless, you know, live view cameras, because we were the first company to introduce it. So it seemed like the right camera to introduce on that 15th anniversary.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because, you know, there's a lot of commentary that I see in the chat about, you know, hey, you know, Micro Four Thirds was always created from day one to be small, compact, and just tiny cameras. And while, yes, there is the benefit there, ultimately, when mirrorless came out, it was the alternative, the system size, to be much smaller than full frame. And it's definitely, with the G9 Mark II and the 100 to 400 and the 2x teleconverter that you can now use with that lens, this kit is so much smaller and lighter when you look at the sum of its parts.
Yeah, plus the 35 to 100 getting refreshed as well. So that's your, you know, f2.8, 70 to 200 equivalent focal length. And I think what's important to note is that to get the burst rates that we're offering, to be able to get the stabilization system that we're offering, to be able to do all the things that this camera can do, body size is always going to get a little bit larger for the cooling that's needed, to be able to keep the camera running the way that you want it, and for the reliability of the weather sealing. You know, this is a fully weather sealed body. It is dust, splash, and freeze resistant. So all of those things have to be brought into consideration when you're designing a camera that you expect people to use outdoors in some challenging conditions. So remember, it's not the camera body, it's the camera system that makes Micro Four Thirds so compelling as a smaller, more compact design.
Yeah, so I see a bunch of questions coming in here. I see one of the first questions here was, will this camera have live view composite? What do you think,
Yes,
Matt?
absolutely. So at launch, this camera will have live view composite. No need to wait for a firmware update. Sean and I have already been using it, so we know that it does live view composite at launch. No problem. It's going to have it for you.
Yeah, and it's same exact implementation. If you've checked out the S5 Mark II, the Mark IIX, the original S5, it does have it. Everything works the same way, and it's honestly so much fun to work with. You know, while yes, again, we are so well known for video and our functionality there, and we're going to talk a little bit about the video functionality in the G9 Mark II as well, because our Instagram camera is actually the G9 Mark II running into our streamer here.
Well, there's another question that came up too. I think I want to get to right away. So someone asked in the chat, and I think it's important maybe to cover all lenses, but someone asked, will the 100 to 400 benefit from phase differential autofocus? And what we can unequivocally say is that all of the lenses, even the ones that you bought many, many years ago, are going to benefit from phase differential autofocus. Now, you'll see some firmware updates for lenses that are going to be coming out. Those firmware updates, really what they're to do is to allow us to autofocus while you zoom the lens. In the past, our lenses haven't been able to do that. So that firmware update is to allow zoom while autofocus while zooming. Obviously, the new lenses that are coming out that we just announced, they already have that firmware in them. So the new 100 to 400 will be able to do that. But don't worry, if you have the existing 100 to 400, we're going to do a firmware update to give you that.
Yeah. So one thing, because actually I just saw a bunch of things go through here, and actually because I just realized that since we're streaming globally, typically the announcement video won't have the pricing in it because it varies region to region.
Right.
Here in the United States, the body-only pricing is $18.99 US. I will defer to and recommend that you go take a look at the various different Panasonic regions in your website, or your LUMIX regions in your LUMIX websites in your region. It's been a long couple of days for the current pricing at your select dealer and all of that to make sure that you're getting the accurate information. So one of the other things that I had seen some questions about too was the high resolution shot mode. As we mentioned in the announcement video, this is the 100 megapixel handheld high resolution shot mode. So that means that very similar to what we were doing with the GH6, you're going to be able to actually get a ton of resolution out of this camera. But more importantly, high resolution shot mode is carrying the motion detection and the motion kind of compensation functionality that we did in the G9, the GH6. So even when you're doing, outdoors landscape photography, whether you're using handheld or non-handheld, you're gonna be able to get a really solid image out of this with the benefits of higher resolution, but also better color tonality, since you're capturing more information than a standard single still. It's a really, really fun camera to shoot with. And as far as power goes, it will be using the BLK22 batteries.
Absolutely.
So it's the same battery as the S5 Mark II, the Mark IIX.
I think it's important to note though is it'll still work with it'll still work with the BLF19 as well. It mostly will just restrict some of the video functionality in the camera if you use that. So if you're a G9 user who primarily focuses on photography, you shouldn't really notice much of an impact if you're going to use the 19s as well. So it also, frankly, I know we've announced a new battery grip, but if you happen to be an S5 owner who's got the old battery grip, you can actually still use it because I've been using it on there as well. So you can kind of work with either battery grip with the camera as well.
Yeah, and let's hear.
There was another thing, which is while you're looking, so there are questions about ports. So let's briefly talk about what the ports are on the camera. So really, it's almost the exact same port complement as the G9 as the original G9. However, the biggest change is that we've moved to a USB-C with PD. So you now have power delivery of the ability to charge and power the camera simultaneously. As always, we recommend that you use 9 volts, 3 amp supplied PD devices to be able to power the camera. But you'll still get full-size HDMI port on the camera. You still get a mic jack. You still get a headphone jack. Dual card slots. Both card slots are UHS-2 compliant, so you get dual SD card slots with the camera. It's also compatible with the XLR1, so you can add the XLR1 audio adapter, which is different than what we did on the original G9. So you do have that ability to do that with the camera as well. I don't think I've missed. Oh, it has a remote port, so you can obviously do remote triggering with if you have a slider for time lapses, things like that.
And possibly the thing that I think you missed a little bit here is probably my favorite part. And as a photographer with these cameras, I think it's going to come across as a little weird.
Yeah, I would agree.
This.
Okay.
This is the Condor Blue handle that that they released that allows the use of the SanDisk ProBlade mags.
Yeah. And
truthfully, as a photographer, this has been like one of the coolest things that I've had attached to the camera.
Okay.
Because I do, if anybody follows our LUMIX Live platform, that we will be actually continuing this conversation on Thursday on the LUMIX USA channel. So make sure to follow us over there.
Yeah.
Link will be posted later today. I do photography with our cameras, actually quite a bit of photography. And a lot of it is motorsports, a lot of motorcycles now. And having this, being able to mount up onto my cage, because I use a simple small rig cage on mine, have this plugged in, I'm never having to worry about any kind of SD cards or storage media or how many photos I want to take, because now I've just got SSD support. And it works fully for photo, video, whatever recording options you want to use in this camera. So now when I get home, I'm literally just dropping this mag out, sliding it into my other mag, and I got a terabyte of storage here.
Speed up the workflow,
absolutely. It's insane. And this is one of those things where, while yes, we're talking a lot about photography, and don't worry everybody, we are getting to the video functionality shortly. The advancements that are made in the video side can help us in the photography side. They can speed up our workflow. They can enable things like bringing back pre-burst into the camera.
Yeah.
You know, in the video side, y'all know that as pre-roll or pre-record.
Right.
We're just doing pretty much the same thing, but now we're able to do it with the full-blown RAW and JPEG images. So that 60 frames per second burst, the 60 frames per second SH or the pre option, up to a second and a half. So we're talking, what is that, 90 frames before you actually press the shutter?
Right.
That's stuff that kind of grows from the video logic that we've had and we've built up over these 15 years. So.
Well, and I actually appreciate the 40 frame per second option as well.
Yes.
Just because 60, like, I love having 60 for certain things. Other times, it's a lot of photos to cull through. So it's nice to have that sort of flexibility. And then touching back on the USB handle for photography, as you mentioned, with time-lapse functionality, you know, it's certainly helpful. But I want to point out that the G9 Mark II's time-lapse function has had a pretty significant update over the original G9 as well.
Oh, yes.
So I still believe that Panasonic has the best time-lapse function of any camera that's on the market. So you're now getting the new calculator that we've incorporated. So you have the ability to have the camera do the math for you as to how many frames you're going to need for the time-lapse video that you want to deliver. It has the exposure leveling built into it as well. So it's a pretty significant update to the time-lapse function as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so across the board, this camera's been so overhauled from the original G9.
Right.
And clearly, yes, there are the users out there, myself was included for quite a while, that I loved the G9 camera. I loved what it stood for. I love what we originally set out to do with that camera. And I've seen, this is a good way, I think, to segue into some of the video conversation because...
Well, before we do that,
yeah.
there's a couple of things I just want to point out. I want to do just a quick rundown of what kind of hardware has changed, and
yes.
then we'll go into videos. So as a rundown of what's changed in the camera. So obviously the chassis is a bit different. We've moved to the S5 II style chassis. So that gives us a very slight reduction in size over the chassis of the G9. Keep in mind that we've improved the processing power dramatically in this camera over the G9. It is a much more powerful processor. We're using a BLK22 battery, which produces more voltage to the camera, yet we've kept the weight exactly the same as the original G9 original G9. So no changes to the body's weight at all. And some other benefits of sticking to the existing chassis is that accessories that were designed for the S5 II they're compatible with the G9 Mark II as well. Now, we've added an extra button on the front of the camera. So like there's one cage company that will probably introduce an update to their cage specific for the G9 Mark II, but almost every other cage is going to fit this camera just fine. So chassis wise, that's why we did this. And frankly, our engineers, when they were designing the S5 II and the S5 IIX, they were consulting with the G9II engineering team for that product. So they effectively came to a conclusion to have a design that they would work for both. And they really wanted to emphasize a deeper grip so that it would be beneficial to both categories. So your chassis is a completely new chassis. The engine is a completely new engine with more processing power. The sensor, I want to make sure we address this because there seems to be some misunderstandings about this sensor. This is not the GH6's sensor. It is not the same sensor. Your first clue about this should be the fact that it has PDAF on the sensor. So this is our phase hybrid autofocus system. It's going to have the exact same number of autofocus points as the S-series cameras have. So that should be your first clue. But the second clue that you should have is that it's a very different architecture, is that we've now been able to bring dynamic range boost all the way down to ISO 100. And so this camera, unlike the GH6 where there's an on-off toggle for dynamic range boost, frankly, there is no need for it anymore. You're running all the way down to ISO 100. There is no need to turn DR boost on or off. So the only time you won't be using DR boost is going to be if you're shooting at frame rates that are 61 frames or higher. So we have a 75 frame per second burst mode for autofocus single. You know, honestly, I don't know how many people will really use that. They're probably going to use autofocus continuous. So an autofocus continuous, you're going to have DR boost. When you're shooting at 4K 60 or 5.7K 60, you're getting your DR boost functionality. So this is a very different sensor and produces just stunning imagery. And you know, I was so confident with this camera that, you know, truth be told, sorry, Pomona High School, I literally used this prototype camera to shoot my daughter's volleyball team for all their volleyball photos. I was that excited for this camera and its photo quality. So now that we've run through some of the distinctions and the differences here, I think now let's go ahead and move into some of the video specs.
Yeah, so as we said, video is still a very important piece of modern cameras these days. And video being something that we have, you know, a fairly strong aptitude for, you can understand that we are not going to let this camera fall short. And if you're coming from the original G9, it is aces all across the board here. 5.8K open gate using the full sensor area, so the full 4:3 aspect ratio up to 30 frames per second. You have 4K and C4K up to 120 frames per second using full sensor width.
And subsampled from the full 5.7K video image. So you're literally subsampling down from 5.7K to get that 120 frame per second. It's in my opinion, the best looking 120 frame on the market.
Oh yeah, easily. And then when you go into the full HD options, we do up to 240 frames per second as a native codec for this. So that's audio focusing and audio and focusing.
Exactly.
The camera will also still have, as many have seen on the top plate of the camera, we have the slow and quick function, which will also be supporting up to 300 frames per second in the slow and quick or the VFR style function.
Yeah, in full high definition.
Yeah, so you're getting, as far as frame rates go, you're getting like the full-blown plethora of frame rates that we've offered. Even to the point that this camera's got basically all of the same relative video functions that you see in something like the GH6. But here is where it's different. Obviously, the GH6 is an actively cooled camera. That has our heat dissipation system with an active fan on the back of the camera to keep that system cool in the thermal environments that we rate up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 40 C?
40 degrees Celsius.
40 C. In the G9 Mark II, there are no hard limitations on video.
In terms of recording times?
Yes, in terms of time limits. So when you look at the original G9, there was like a 10-minute limit, a 30-minute limit, and that was because that camera was thermally limited, very stronger than the GH5 series at the time. Knowing that just across the board, everyone has kind of evolved. Whether you need video or not, Video is a part of this world. Why not offer it in the camera? It does not add any cost to the cameras. It does not change anything. These are mirrorless cameras these days, which means they're constantly pulling a video feed off the sensor to capture your still images. So our logic here is we want to make products, make cameras, as I said in the announcement, we want to make tools that support creators, photographers, videographers, no matter who you are with it. So what you will work with on the G9 Mark II is more about the environment that you are filming in. Yeah. Down in Austin, I mean, we've been well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for about almost 2 months straight.
That's well over 40, like in the 43 degrees Celsius range is where they've been.
Yeah. And G9 Mark II in my studio where I've got it, 70, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, G9 Mark II, perfect camera for that setup. But if you really know that you need to be out in extreme temperatures and you're someone who needs a top of the line A camera for video production, GH6, S5 Mark II, S5 Mark IIX, those are going to be your great go-to cameras for that.
Yeah.
This one I think is going to be that perfect camera where if you're a set photographer or you're a social media content creator or you're someone just getting into video, you are just starting into this, G9 Mark II is going to be that perfect camera to get into it because you're not going to miss the video features.
Not at all.
And most of the time, you're not needing truly unlimited recording.
Yeah, hours of continuous recording time.
Yeah. So yeah, we made a lot of effort to make sure that this camera is addressing the true modern photographer first and foremost, and really sitting as a good solid secondary for pro video users.
And so some of you may ask, well, why didn't we include the fan? It was already in the S5 II. We're using the same chassis as the S5 II. Realistically, in our surveys of photographers, one of the things that photographers seem to covet most is a high quality in-body or dual IS system. And so what we've done is in place of that fan, we have incorporated a gyro sensor that's a much higher grade gyro sensor than we currently include on the S-series cameras. So by incorporating this much higher precision gyro sensor and just the natural extra movement that the sensor can provide in a micro Four Thirds mount, we were able to now achieve a full 8 stops of in-body image stabilization. And that system works out to 60 millimeters, which is the equivalent of 120 millimeters. So you're getting 8 stops at up to 120 millimeter focal length. Now, when you use the dual IS system, effectively that system kicks in once we get past 160 millimeters, 120 equivalent. So that's why when we get longer, it has to drop a little bit to 7.5 stops, because now we're at effectively the limits of the optics and what they're capable of stabilizing. So what you're getting in return for losing the fan is a much better image stabilization system. And guess what, video shooters? You're going to love this new stabilization system, especially when you see what we've done with the EIS implementation. So the electronic image stabilization has now added a couple of different crop options. So we understand some of our competitors, they have electronic image stabilization functions, and when you turn it on, it's an extreme crop, and then when you turn it off, it's no crop. And so what we've done is we give you no crop, we give you a minor crop, about an 8%-ish crop, and then we do a more extreme crop. And when we do this, we've added some additional corrections. So when you do the EIS just standard crop, for those of you who've complained about kind of the warpy corners when you're dealing with really wide lenses, I saw someone reference actually the 6 millimeter lens and ask if it's too wide. Well, you're gonna have to try it with this new camera, because when you do that very slight crop, we're actually doing a geometric correction to correct out the kind of interesting things that wide angle lenses do. In particular, they tend to keystone things where it looks like if you're shooting a building, it looks like narrower at the top and wider at the bottom. Yeah. So we're correcting that out to get rid of a lot of that warping that happens on the sides. And then for people who want to not ever have to use a gimbal again, if you do that more extreme crop, you're gonna be shocked at how good the stabilization is and how fast you can run with it. So we've given video shooters a more sustainable stabilization system while also giving photographers what we consider to be the best stabilizer in the business for photography.
Yeah, and actually continuing on that the photography side there, I actually want to touch on those subject detection modes too.
Yeah, exactly. For autofocus?
Yeah.
People care?
Yeah.
People care about that? Okay.
Yeah. So as we announced in the video, this camera gets a lot of improvements when it comes to subject detection and obviously the upgrade to PDAF in Micro Four Thirds. So let's start with the kind of core changes that we've made in subject detections. So on the G9 Mark II, this camera is supporting now a separated human and animal detection option. Right. So if you're used to working with the LUMIX cameras right now, you'll see that subject detection for animals is paired with human. So you got an owner and a pet, you got a horseback rider, you're gonna see the box over both of them together.
Right.
The new system has separated these two out. So now in the options, you can select animal, select human. Within each of those, you can now select the body and face for human, or you can select face and eye for human. But now in animal, we have a dedicated animal eye detection mode. And for those that have been using our system for quite some time, the animal eye detection mode is I would say, a much more modernized UI. Wouldn't you, Matt?
Yeah, it's more in line with what other cameras are doing. So
yes,
I'll let you explain on it.
Yeah. So with our standard face and eye detection we've been doing, we put a box over the face with a crosshair. In our animal detection mode on the G9 Mark II, this will be just a small box over the animal's eye. So this will give you a little bit cleaner looking overall image while you're, kind of framing your shot up. And it gives you that point that you know that it is focusing on the animal's eye, and that's where it's going. But in addition to the animal detection, we've also updated the body detection algorithms. So now the system is actually a lot tighter. So all cameras use a form of machine learning or deep learning for what their subject detections are.
Yeah, if they incorporate subject detection, there's
yes.
there's deep learning happening in the background, or what some people are calling AI.
Yeah, AI. And the truth is, your cameras themselves do not have AI in them. They are AI trained models for this.
Right.
What that means, though, is it's actually a really big benefit for this. It means that we can alter and change these things as we develop, as our engineers go through and they pick up new models, they add more objects into the models, and you're seeing that on the G9 Mark II. So body detection in the existing cameras, the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, will give you from shoulder to shoulder, head to toe for body detection. On the G9 Mark II, this has been tightened up. So now you're gonna get a much tighter box on your subject. It's gonna be focusing a lot more on the torso and the head. So now you don't have, one, as busy as a UI as the previous generations have, but also you get more accuracy, you get less overlap between subjects that kind of come close to each other, and just gives you an overall more well-rounded experience.
Right, and to be clear, and then Sean will get to some other recognition in a second, because I saw a couple of things pop up in the comments. With the eye detection and the small box, that's the animal detect. We are still keeping our existing UI for face detection, eye detection for humans. Yes. So the human UI is not changing, it's just the animal, because we've added eye detection, so we've made the decision to keep the same UI. Yes. So now that we've talked about humans and animals, are there any other subjects we could track?
Probably my favorite ones. As I alluded to before, I love motorsports photography.
Yeah.
I love photographing motorcycles. I ride motorcycles. It's just a really fun kind of thing to photograph.
Sean. We watch it. We see your Instagram. We know you photograph motorcycles.
But there are a lot of people who want to get into some of these more recreational styles of photography. And while we were in here kind of messing around with the recipes and kind of upgrading things, it made perfect sense for us to say, look, let's add in new automotive detection options. So we've now added a car dedicated detection mode. So this becomes perfect for anyone that's kind of just getting into this, so that you don't have to necessarily really fiddle around too much with where does my focus point go? How do I kind of make sure that I'm tracking with a subject right? This will help you get used to your framing, your composition, and let the system take over a little bit of that legwork for you. But if you're a seasoned pro, you've been working in that field forever, and you know where you want your focus selector to be, how you want your subject framed, This is just that added, kind of little bit of extra background for you. So you get, I always like to say it's like giving you a buffer range for this, and
Right.
Joke there being we've added a bigger buffer.
Yeah. I saw where you're going.
Go ahead, Sean. Let me just explain the joke to people
Sean
like an idiot.
Sean doesn't have kids, and he still tells dad jokes.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's great working with him.
Oh, yeah. But so yeah, with this, it's going to give you that little bit better, kind of control over what you're going with. But the biggest thing for me is that we added a motorcycle detection mode. And I'm going to say, I mean, when we were working with the S5 Mark II and doing a lot of our evaluations internally on that, I think 99% of the stuff I shot with the camera to kind of help feed our engineers some information was all motorcycles. So I'm going to claim that I may have had maybe a little bit to do with this. I would hope.
All right.
But
So
yeah.
a couple of questions that keep popping up again. So there'll be some that'll be difficult for us to address.
Yes.
Others that we'll readdress. So number one, on the thermal side, I know it keeps popping up. The thermal limitations are effectively just about exactly the same as the G9. So if you're using it outdoors in 40 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, it's going to be basically the same as what the G9 was.
Yeah.
We can't quote what that is because there's so many environmental impacts that can affect what the recording time would be. Is it under direct sunlight? Is it a high humidity day? I can't just tell you, oh, it'll do 2 seconds or it'll do like 45 minutes. I can't do that. It's the same as what the G9 was. So that's the easiest way to look at that. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how long it can record in warm to hot environments. I don't think this is going to be a big issue. And we've sent cameras out. Take a look at some of the reviews that are out there. I am certain all of them will be doing a test on some sort of hot day to see what the thermal limits are of the camera.
Oh, of course.
As to the confirmation of a couple of things, so somebody asked us to confirm.
The battery?
Yeah. So yes, I accidentally put a BLF19 in the camera, which is the original G9 battery, on accident. It worked fine. You're just not going to get all of the video functionality of the camera, so just keep that in mind. The other thing to remember is that, actually, hold on a second. No, you know what, folks? I misspoke. It does not work with the BLF19. That's my fault. It was my mistake. I put it in a different camera. It was a G8.6, so I apologize. It only works with the 22. That's my fault.
Okay.
The other thing that we want to confirm, this is not the G8.6's sensor. It's a different sensor than the G8.6. It's different because it has PDAF points on the sensor, and it's different because it can operate down to ISO 100. So you should expect much better performance out of this sensor at lower ISOs than what we were getting.
Yeah. Let's see here. I saw a couple of questions come in about the open gate recording. So one says 4.3 open gate. Since the camera can do 60 FPS in photography, is it possible that 5.8K 4.360 could come in a firmware update?
I think it's unlikely. We weren't able to do it on the G8.6. So.
Yeah, it is unlikely. But just to be clear here, the 4x3 open gate recording function on the G9 Mark II does not have a crop. It is the full sensor height and width. So you're not losing field of view there. It is 30 frames per second, or 2997 is the maximum speed that you can record that at. If you want to go to 60 frames per second, you are shooting in the anamorphic mode, which is a 4.4K option, which does crop into the sensor to be able to get to that speed at the faster frame rates.
Yeah.
So should you need that faster frame rate, it is available in the camera. You do want to go to the 4.4K. The full-blown full sensor height and width up to 2997. So I just want to make sure that gets kind of clear.
Somebody had asked about anamorphic support.
Yeah.
Same exact
That's
support.
your realm,
Same exact support as the G8.6. Same exact support as the S5 II and S5 IIX.
Yeah.
So it's all there.
Let's see here. Cliff says vlog, video vlog, dual native ISO values. So this system is not a dual native ISO system like you see in the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX. or like the GH5S.
Yeah, because it uses the DR boost function.
Yes.
So that is effectively, I'm going to cover that part just for a second so
Yeah,
everybody
go for it.
understands what that means. And then I promise Cliff will tell you what the native ISO points are. So effectively what we're doing is that for every frame that's captured in the camera that's going into buffer, it's sent, well not buffer, on the chip. So every frame is sent to 2 different amplifiers. Okay, so one amplifier has a lot of gain. And by doing a lot of gain, it's not going to have a lot of highlight information. It's going to be, maybe 4 stops, 6 stops of actual dynamic range. But that gives us very clean, lower midtones and shadows. And so that's then encoded. And then we do a very low gain image, which gives us tons of dynamic range, but very noisy, lower shadows, midtones, lower midtones and shadows. And then effectively what happens is both of those are brought in, they're processed, and we take the clean shadows and lower midtones of the high gain, we take the dynamic range of the low gain, and we mux them together. So you get those clean shadows and midtones, and then we kick out a 16-bit image if it's a photo, and that gives you a tremendous amount of dynamic range and latitude from this sensor. So in terms of what is the high dynamic range, or the highest latitude you get out of the sensor, in photo modes, like most of the film simulations we do, like standard or like vivid, any of those, your base ISO is ISO 100.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that this sensor is much cleaner even at ISO 800 than what we were doing, or even frankly at ISO 3200 than where the G9 is. So you're getting big enhancements there. Now for Vlog, which is what I think Cliff cares about, so Vlog we're at ISO 500. And so the GH6 was at ISO 2000. So you're effectively coming down 2000, 1500. So that's 2 stops lower, and it's 2 stops lower than where the base ISO of the GH6 was as well when you use DR boost.
Yeah. So lots of improvements overall image quality, and that's why again I don't think we can kind of press on this enough. This is a totally different sensor than what we used prior, and across the board, whether you're picking this up as a photography tool or you are someone that's leaning in more with the video, it's gonna give you solid results whatever the area you want to go to. And I see a couple of other questions here while you're checking the global one. Question here was, does it do long exposure, live long exposure? Yes, live view composite is included from day one out of the box, so that is there. Steve H asks, what's Leica monochrome L squared? The L squared technology collaboration we have with Leica that was originally started with the in the S series, so the L mount system, has given us actually some really cool kind of technology benefits here. In the G9 Mark II, this camera has a Leica monochrome black and white profile. Now, this is different than our L monochrome profiles that you already see in our cameras. And what this is giving you is actually a much more tuned by Leica black and white. So it is not our interpretation of it. It is basically, we've been taught what their style is, what their look is for black and white, and it's applied. That's why it's actually called Leica monochrome in the camera. So there's that one.
So here's a couple of other ones that have come up. So the question was, will the PDAF work with Olympus lenses?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll get the benefits of having PDAF with those Olympus lenses. So video codecs has come up. We'll do H.265. We do H.264. Those are either an MP4 or an MOV wrapper. And we're also now doing ProRes. Now, ProRes will have some limitations because it's an SD card. So you can do 1080 to the SD card. And then if you need to do like 4K, that's going to go out through the USB port to an external SSD. So you have access to that. Some questions about the bit depth of the photos. The photos are capable of 16-bit bit depth. So the raw photos can be 16-bit. So I done one last time because it's come up multiple times. They can be 16-bit bit depth.
Let's see here. Will the new AF in the G9 Mark II also come to the S5 Mark II and the Mark II X in future firmware? If you followed us long enough, you know that we typically cannot comment on any future developments for anything unless it's a formally announced kind of setup here. So at this point, I cannot confirm or deny that there may be anything coming to the S5 Mark II or 2X from this camera. What I can encourage you to do is get subscribed, follow all of our channels, because obviously you know that you're going to hear that kind of stuff first on any of our platforms that we do live streaming. Yeah, so just kind of keep yourself updated.
So a couple of other things that have come up here. So somebody had mentioned a question about like comparisons of the S5 2X. Obviously keep some things in mind with S5 II, S5 2X. Sensor's physically larger, so when we go to a physically larger sensor, there are some benefits in terms of low light sensitivity, creating shallower depths of field with smaller apertures. So clearly benefits, but the big thing here is that when we go to those larger sensors, they tend to be slower readouts. So that's really what this comes down to, is that for somebody who wants a faster, higher higher frame per second camera, that's where the G9 Mark II is really going to excel. So I just want to make sure we addressed that for everybody in the comment, because I saw it pop a few times.
Just double checking, I think we may have lost our Instagram live feed.
Oh, and then the other question was the Leica monochrome mode. And is that a photography only color profile, or can it be used to shoot video as well? I have not tried it yet, Sean, so I'm assuming, have you tried it for video yet? I'm assuming it would work.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties with, I think, the system in general, is that you can do,
I'll check while Sean talks. I'll triple check.
Color profiles, you can record in whatever profiles you want. And it's actually kind of, I think, actually kind of like a really good point is shifting into some of the color profile conversation.
Yeah, Leica monochrome's right there. I'm in video mode now. Leica monochrome is popping just fine, so we can absolutely use Leica monochrome. And then it's probably a good time to talk about real-time LUT.
Exactly. So the G9 Mark II is also going to be the first of the Micro Four Thirds cameras that supports real-time LUT. But I want to give some clarity on real-time LUT here. Because there are two ways to utilize it in the camera.
Well, before we do that, we have a lot of photographers on this call, this live stream. So, hey, 1992, we're doing a call now. So maybe we can first define what a LUT is, so everybody understands.
Yes.
So a LUT it technically stands for look up table, and in the video world, it's a look. It's a style that we apply in post. So we are tuning the image to look a certain way. We do that all the time with presets in like Photoshop or in Lightroom, programs like that. So what photographers call like looks or photo styles, videographers call LUTs. And the difference here is that there's a very set in stone process for creating LUTs that comes from the video world that allows us to have these set ways of doing things that can then be incorporated and effectively imported into the camera. Yep. Whereas those looks that exist in all of these different photo editing software, they're all somewhat unique, and there's not like an easy way for you to just export them. Fortunately, programs like Photoshop have the ability to take the looks that you can generate within Photoshop, and you can export what's called a LUT within Photoshop, which then allows you to take that LUT and bring it into the camera, and you can create your own looks. So for some people who buy a specific camera brand because they like a specific look that it can produce, or a specific film stock that they love, great. Find that LUT, bring it into the camera, and you can now create those looks in the camera. And that's really the benefit. Now, what Sean was going to get to, as he was typing on a device here, is the fact that we have two different ways to handle these real-time LUTs. And there's a dedicated mode of the camera called real-time LUT that's intended to use the V-Log profile and then add your LUT and bake that in and create a finished look in the camera for video use.
Yes.
But for photographers, we also have our My Film Styles or My Photo Styles function. And within there, if you scroll down to the second page, you have the ability to import LUTs there as well.
Yep.
And so a lot of you may have like a base color profile you already like from Panasonic. I like our natural picture profile.
Yeah.
And so you may start with a natural picture profile, and then when you bring them into Photoshop, you may have like a preset you've already designed that gives you your unique secret sauce to what your photos look like. Well, now I can just go in, and I'll let you walk through the Photoshop export process. So quickly explain how they'll export them.
Yeah, so a lot of people these days, obviously we've moved to programs like Capture One, Lightroom, things like that for general editing. But if you have a very specific look that you like to create, you would actually go into Photoshop, open the raw file, select the color profile that you want to use as the base. So in this case, like say you want to use standard. Instead of letting Adobe choose the color for the profile, make sure you go in there and select camera standard.
Right.
And then take that file, open it up, and then apply your edits as layers in Photoshop. If you've never worked in Photoshop, there are definitely some great tutorials that explain how to work in layers, because it is a little different than Lightroom and Capture One and all that stuff. But what is important about why you want to do this in Photoshop is Photoshop has the ability to export out a lookup table or a LUT in a .cube file for use in other platforms.
And make sure you use a 33 precision. So there's a precision setting. Make sure it's a 33.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're going through, setting up 33 point, save it out, and probably the most important thing, which is probably where I get most of the troubleshooting questions about this, is make sure you're using a 64 gig or larger card to do this, because you want an SDXC memory card. Take that, put your LUT file onto just the root of the card, just like you would do with a firmware update.
Right.
Go into the menu, into the LUT library option, which is now our repository for all the LUTs you want to load in, and you can load in, you can hold and load 10 at a time right now. Once you load those in, as Matt pointed out, you just go into the My Photo Styles, which you have up to 10 in the camera. I think there are only 3 or 4 visible in shipment. You just go into the menu, My Photo Style, and then you flip all the other ones to visible.
Right.
And you can program them in, up to 10 of them. In fact, I did an entire walkthrough on Lumix Live a couple of weeks ago about how to use this for photographers. So I encourage you to go take a look at that too, because that's a visual demonstration as well.
You might have been doing that as a preview for what we were announcing today.
Probably.
So, yeah. So,
probably.
Yeah. So again, we want to make sure everybody understands how to work within these LUTs and what the benefit is. So I've seen a couple of other questions about unlocking features in the camera. So we understand that the G9 had some features you could unlock. G9 Mark II doesn't have an unlock code to unlock anything. So everything we've talked about today is included. So whether it's vlog or waveform monitor or vector scope, all of those things are going to be included at the purchase price.
Yeah. Sorry, we are, our video feed has dropped on Instagram, so we're just trying to get this back up. Cool.
So I'm just trying to go through any of these last comments that I've seen here.
Is waveform in the camera?
Yeah. Waveform, vector scope. We're not going to spend a lot of time in any of our marketing or promotions talking about the video features, but think of it this way. Most of the things that we've already developed, it's technically harder for us to pull them out, and is more costly for us to pull them out than to keep them in. So that's effectively what's going on here.
Let's see, what else did we get here? So we covered that.
Yeah, we've effectively covered practically everything to talk about with the camera. So let's just touch base a little bit on the 100 to 400 lens and the refresh of the 35 to 100. So I'd like to remind everybody that, several months ago we refreshed the 12 to 35, and that became a Leica certified lens. So it's a 12 to 35 f2.8 constant aperture, changes to lens coating, changes to the matting inside the lens to cut down on reflections and flare and overall,
ghosting and things like that.
So all of that was corrected on that lens. I believe a side benefit is it may already be ready for the autofocus system.
Yep.
So you didn't,
pretty sure.
If you have the new one, you're probably not going to have to do a firmware update on it. The 35 to 100 has the same updates and improvements as well. So it's like a certified improvements to cut down on flare, lens, ghosting, things like that. And again, it will ship ready to go for PDAF. And again, the only difference here is that when you zoom, it can focus while zooming. That will be the firmware change that will be coming to our other lenses. These lenses already have it incorporated.
Yeah.
Now, the 100 to 400 has gone through some pretty significant changes to its design. Somebody asked online, is there a difference in weight? Nope. It's the same basic weight as the original 100 to 400. It's just as compact, which makes it a super attractive, like walk-around lens, especially for wildlife and birding. It's great. But where we've made some changes is that we've now allowed you to be able to add teleconverter to it. So the previous one, there was a piece of glass back there. Was no way for you to add a teleconverter to it. Now you can go ahead and use the 2x teleconverter or 1.4 teleconverter with the camera. When you use that 2x teleconverter, this is a very interesting additional feature of the camera. So at the full telephoto end, you're now going to get 1-to-1 macro with that lens. So you effectively have a 1600 millimeter 1-to-1 macro lens with that product. So you can focus on things that are extremely close to you at 1600 millimeters, which is really cool. Now there is one byproduct to making this system work with a teleconverter. So you're going to find that there's a new switch on the side of the lens.
Yes.
That switch limits the zoom for how wide the lens can go. The assumption here is that if you're adding a teleconverter, you're really wanting to get closer to things. So we don't want that lens, smashing into the teleconverter. So you have the ability to lock it. So it locks it at 210 millimeters out. Now, for those of you who are absent-minded like me, I'm the first to admit it, I may have bounced the lens off a teleconverter already. Nothing to worry about. It's all spring-loaded internally. It will absorb that energy, so don't worry about damaging anything. It's just, it's disconcerting when it happens. So that's really the only issue, is just so that you're not disconcerted by it happening.
Yeah, and as Matt said, it's designed by the engineers because we know that there are going to be those times where, like, maybe you want to leave the teleconverter attached and you want to store the lens because you're moving from location to location, you're putting it in the bag. You can store the lens with the teleconverter on. When you attach it and you're below 210 millimeter, the camera's gonna tell you, hey, you can't use this focal length for the teleconverter.
Right.
You just flip that switch on the lens, move it out to 210, you'll hear a click, lens will lock it in place. And it's a very well thought out update for it because it doesn't compromise the size of the 100 to 400 for those who don't want to use teleconverters, but also gives you the benefit for the teleconverter in the most common focal lengths that you're really kind of wanting that teleconverter, which is out in the much more telephoto range. So it's been a lot of fun to shoot with. I've done a lot of the motorsports photography with it, shooting it wide open with the 2x converter on it, and I'm super thrilled with it. I even did handheld high res of the moon with it.
Yeah.
Because that's a really fun, challenging thing to try to do.
It's a nightmare.
But
all right, so somebody keeps spamming the comments, so I'll be happy to answer your question. Yes, the G9 Mark II, because it can operate from under ISO 800 with DR boost, I would say it's going to take better still photos than the GH6.
Yes.
Because you can operate down with the DR boost down to ISO 100. So I guess it just depends on what ISO you shoot a wedding at in the question you're asking. But if you're shooting at ISO 800 and up, no, they're going to be about the same image quality because we have the same DR boost function operating from 800 and up.
Yeah.
But once we're below 800, if your ISOs are below 800, you're going to get better images from the G9 Mark II.
Yeah.
Photographically, you are.
And that's actually a really good segue because we did not mention this in the video, and I think it's going to get lost in some of the conversation, but I will be talking about this on Thursday. The G9 Mark II is also the first camera because, we talked about burst rates, right? 60 frames per second in electronic shutter. There's also a 20 frames per second burst mode option in electronic shutter with continuous focus. But this also had a mechanical burst rate upgrade. So this is now 10 frames per second mechanical. But probably the coolest part that I am super excited about, and the wedding photographers are the ones that actually kind of sparked my mind for this, is that you can do continuous flash firing with our burst mode on the G9 Mark II.
Yeah, this is a first for us in Micro Four Thirds.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be our flashes. You can use third-party flashes with this.
And we've already tested it, and the company that begins with the G, we tested theirs.
Yeah, so if you are a flash photographer and you've wanted the ability to do burst fire with flashing, or with flash, you've got the 10 frames per second, you've got flash firing, and it's one of those subtle little changes that, because we've been so focused on video over the years, now that we're really kind of, narrowing in on what we can do and what we want to do in the photography side, there's a lot of just really cool stuff that's been added to it. So
at this point, I think we've covered practically everything that we've had questions about.
Yeah. I think, so a couple things here. Thank you, everybody. Both you on YouTube, on our global account, on the USA account, everyone on Instagram, thank you so much for bearing with us for the last probably 10 minutes while the video feed dropped on Instagram. It appeared that the audio was at least coming through. This has been an incredibly exciting day. And honestly, it's been, I think, a really exciting last couple of months as we've been kind of leading up to this. As a photographer, primarily, this has been one of the cameras I've been waiting for quite a while. And is this going to replace my S5 Mark IIX that I still love to shoot with? No, but they're both going to be the tandem tools that I use. And I think that's why I'm so excited that they share the chassis. They share the fit, you know, the finish, where the buttons are. I can seamlessly be jumping back and forth between these two cameras, and I'm not giving up video features. I know you and I have had the conversations a lot about photography and using these cameras in which you prefer to go out with. What are your personal, what are you excited about with this one?
Well, first off, when I do photography, I actually am a micro four thirds shooter. I 10 to 25, 25 to 50 f1.7 lenses when I'm doing anything portrait related. Other than that, it's usually a 12 to 60 for walkabout. Yeah. And so for me, it's great to have that refresh. As a video shooter and somebody who cares a lot more about video than photography, this is a stealth fighter of a camera. I think most people, when they get a chance to see what this thing can do, are going to be shocked at just how capable it is as a video camera. I realize we're putting a lot of emphasis on the photo side, but I think a lot of people are going to be really impressed with it as a video product.
Yeah. So with that, everybody, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. This is the culmination of a lot of work from a lot of teams across the globe. I want to thank our engineers in Japan for all the work that they did on this camera. Our marketing team in the US for working with Matt and I on this launch project. And everybody out there, all of you, for going out there, creating really cool, awesome photography, videography. We will be talking more about this camera on the LUMIX USA channel this Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So get yourself following LUMIX USA. That link will go up a little bit later today, so be sure to follow that. We will be continuing conversations also after this, various different topics. Maybe we'll do more video-focused topic where you and I will kind of just go through and really just nail on video. We'll have the very specific photo topics. Right. But overall, again, thank you all. It's been an awesome day. We're super excited to see what all of you can get out there and create with it. And yeah, looking forward to a lot more cool stuff coming from LUMIX